Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers, just past the 920 subscriber mark. I can't believe we have gotten to that milestone so fast. But if a few more of you can hit the subscribe button so we can get to 1,000, I would really appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss any future Milwaukee Bucks updates. So, this first thing that I'm going to cover, it's from an article that came from Fansided's Quinn Everts, and this tackles Myles Turner's new situation and how he's coming into a completely new system and the fit with Giannis in the front court that's supposedly or hopefully going to be amazing. And by all the evidence that we've been given over the past couple of years, that should be the best defensive front court duo in the entire NBA. But there are also some questions about Myles Turner's fit within the Bucks offense, and a lot of that has to do with the kind of lack of playmaking help around Myles Turner and around Giannis and Antetokounmpo this time around, in terms of the point guards that are going to be the heads of the screening actions and the pick and roll actions, the point guards, the players on the perimeter in general that are going to be feeding Giannis and Myles Turner. That cast isn't as strong as previous years, and of course, this first year in the post Damien Lillard era, it's going to be very interesting to see who really steps up. It's probably going to be Kevin Porter Jr. that steps up as that main playmaker in the pick and roll with both Giannis and Myles Turner. But Quinn Everts from Fanside has a couple of interesting things that he said about Myles Turner and his ability to hopefully mesh within the Bucks system. So, but he is kind of looking at it from a little bit of a negative perspective. So, his words, again, Turner is awesome, but his role in Indiana was clearly defined, and his duties every night stayed mostly consistent. An expanded role isn't suddenly going to make him a bad player, and he's still going to be a positive force in Milwaukee, but the lack of playmaking around him is going to make it tough to maximize his skills. And of course, when you think about it like that, coming from an Indiana Pacers team that was loaded with playmaking, with one of the best playmakers and passers in the NBA, and Tyrese Halliburton manning the ship and being the head of the snake in that system, it's going to be an entirely different world for Myles Turner. After these past few years in Indiana, going from Tyrese Halliburton's passing to Kevin Porter Jr.'s passing. But that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be a bad fit in Milwaukee, or that it's going to be so difficult to, like Quinn Everett said, maximize his skills. I feel like it's not things aren't really going to change as much for Myles Turner in the half court. You could see things changing in transition, because when you are again going from having Tyrese Halliburton, arguably the best passer in the NBA, and how the Pacers would attack in transition and all the creative ways that Tyrese Halliburton would feed Turner and Pascal Siakam on the break, that's going to be missing for Myles Turner this year. Though the Bucks do want to run in transition, that kind of lead playmaker on the break, he's not going to have that kind of luxury of playing with a Tyrese Halliburton per se. But the fact that all it's really going to take for Myles Turner to impact the Bucks offense is to set a screen, fade out to the three-point line, and catch a half decent pass for a catch and shoot three, or just roll to the basket, not necessarily seeking lobs or anything, but just kind of hanging around the dunker spot and just staying ready for opportunities like that. That's really all Myles Turner's offense needs to boil down to for this Bucks team, is set a screen and pop, or set a screen and roll. And though it sounds very simple, there are a lot of other guys in the NBA that do a bunch of in-between stuff, like the Domantas Sabonises, the Alperen Şengüns of the world, of course the Nikola Jokic's. But Myles Turner doesn't need to do anything too flashy to impact winning, and of course that's what we saw in Indiana, and that's probably what we're going to see in Milwaukee for Myles Turner. So I really don't think, as long as Kevin Porter Jr. can make, again, a half decent pass over his shoulder to Myles Turner waiting at the three-point line, I really don't think this is going to be anything too difficult for Myles Turner to handle in terms of getting in tune with the Bucks offense and how they like to work. Anyways, moving forward, talking about one of the Bucks potential ads from this offseason, and a guy that's possibly going to be with the Wisconsin Herd for the foreseeable future, is Cormac Ryan. And of course, we know of Cormac Ryan's past with the Oklahoma City Blue, the Thunder's G League affiliate, and that he became one of, if not the best free throw shooter in all of the G League, and one of the best 3-point shooters in the G League. But it's going to be very tough for him to crack this Bucks rotation or just find a spot on the roster. And this was really exemplified by Last Word on Sports' Daniel Benjamin, who also came out with an article stating that it's again going to be an uphill battle for Cormac Ryan. And in his words, Ryan has an uphill battle to make the Bucks 18-man roster, so expect him to start the season with the herd. Milwaukee's training camp roster is set as the Bucks have filled all 21 roster spots, including 16 players on standard deals. Therefore, the Bucks will have to make a roster decision at the start of the 25-26 campaign. Andre Jackson Jr. appears to be the odd man out as the Bucks backcourt is super crowded. That's something that we've talked about a lot, is that Andre Jackson Jr. is most likely the guy that if anybody were to be dropped by the Milwaukee Bucks, it would be him, especially considering that they restructured his contract and made it so that his deal isn't fully guaranteed until opening night of the 25-26 season. So that is potentially a spot that Cormac Ryan, not necessarily a spot that he can fill because he's the same player or anything, because he's totally not. But Cormac Ryan, that's a spot that he could be chasing. He could try to replace Andre Jackson Jr. in that sense of just getting on the roster. But Cormac Ryan, I do have a lot of hope for him to eventually stand out as one of the Bucks' best G League players who could offer a lot to the actual roster in limited minutes. Um, his ball handling, and in the summer league too, he showed off that he could handle the ball and he can make good decisions, and he has pretty good footwork and just general basketball IQ. And he is a very underrated pick and roll ball handler, I would say. I was very surprised with kind of his comfort in that kind of role. Um, and this is all aside from his incredible free throw shooting, his incredible 3-point shooting that can really make it, both of those skills can make themselves apparent for Cormac Ryan as a member of the Wisconsin Herd. Give him a full year for the G League, and he could really prove that he could earn like 8 to 10 minutes a game for the Bucks in the regular season. If, let's say, if injuries happen and a spot opens up, Cormac Ryan could potentially step in and fill somebody's shoes with relative ease if he gets some experience, or more experience, I should say, at the G League level. So, wanted to cover another article. This one came from NBA.com's John Schumann, who I think with this criticism, he was talking about how the Milwaukee Bucks could struggle with scoring the ball. And this is, of course, in the wake of Damian Lillard's wave and stretch. And in this vein, I feel like this was kind of the lowest hanging fruit possible in terms of pointing at a certain thing that can lessen the Bucks' effectiveness on offense. Because of course, when you lose Damian Lillard for nothing, your offense is most likely going to get worse unless you add somehow a player of his caliber to the roster. It's not very difficult to say that yeah, the Bucks are going to have more of a tough time scoring without one of the best scorers at the point guard position that there's ever been. But he does go on to state a couple other things. In his words, offense could be a struggle, especially if the Bucks don't score on the break or on second chances, which hopefully they do. Kyle Kuzma was more efficient with the Bucks' true shooting percentage of 52% than he was with the Wizards, 46.9% last season, but still needs to be better. Again, possibly the lowest hanging fruit possible to say that Kyle Kuzma needs to be better, because I feel like there's no other kind of point that you can make around this Bucks team that's more evident than that. Though, like he did mention, he did have a better stretch of the season with the Milwaukee Bucks in the regular season before the playoffs hit. True shooting percentage of 52% is not going to cut it. So saying that, yeah, the Bucks can struggle on offense because Kyle Kuzma was bad and there's no Damian Lillard, I feel like that's the most obvious thing, or the most obvious conclusion that you could come to if you're an outsider looking in at this team, and not really taking into account that KPJ is going to get an expanded role, and you bring in Cole Anthony to offer some instant offense off the bench, keeping GTJ and Torian Prince and AJ Green and Ryan Rollins. There is still at least a good amount of 3-point shooting and 3-point shooting variance on this team, but you can easily make the assumption that with no Damian Lillard, the Bucks are going to be worse at offense. That's not really a crazy thing. What is a crazy thing though is this whole situation with the Clippers and Steve Ballmer and Kawhi Leonard, as this whole thing keeps unfolding. The cap circumvention investigation that's again currently ongoing with regard to Kawhi Leonard. And there's been a lot of talk in recent days that Kawhi Leonard's contract could possibly be voided if all of this evidence, leads to something, and Adam Silver and the NBA come to a conclusive finding that the Clippers engaged in cap circumvention tactics. So basically, the question is, if somehow the dream scenario and that's why this segment is affectionately titled "Keep Dreaming." If there's like the 1 to 2% chance that Kawhi Leonard is dropped and he's restricted from re-signing with the Clippers, his contract is voided, could the Bucks, or not even could the Bucks or should the Bucks, would the Bucks possibly be able to land a guy like Kawhi Leonard? And I feel like the answer is most likely a no, because of all situations that you could look at across the NBA, whether it's joining Jokic in Denver, or joining the Houston Rockets to pair with Kevin Durant, which would be the greatest 1-2 offense defense combo in NBA history, even though age and injury are a factor. Um, there are a lot of different situations going to the Warriors with Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. There are a lot of choices that Kawhi Leonard could make, but probably the best in terms of a basketball fit could be with the Milwaukee Bucks, because, as we mentioned Kyle Kuzma before, there is a glaring hole at the Bucks wings in terms of players that could actually affect winning, and Kawhi Leonard would just immediately plug that hole and pair alongside Kawhi, Giannis, and Myles Turner would be the best defensive trio, arguably in NBA history. So just by default. So the possibility of him landing with the Bucks, I mean, I feel like there's more of a chance than people give credit for, though there are a lot of other enticing options around the NBA. From a basketball standpoint, and we know Kawhi Leonard wants to win above all else, going to the Milwaukee Bucks could prove to be the best decision possible. And again, this is without money being a factor. Even though maybe Kawhi wants to get paid a certain amount, and you would bet that he wants to, because he's still not old enough to where he's going to be making his last contract in the NBA. He wants some good amount of money in the interim. But I don't think it's too crazy for the Bucks to pursue Kawhi, maybe get some kind of discussion or discourse going, and then we could see what happens. But all of this comes before there's any conclusion at all to the actual Clippers investigation. Though Pablo Torre has come out and provided even more very gripping evidence that there was a $2 million payment or of some sort to Aspiration, and then Kawhi immediately received some sort of like $1.75 million compensation right after that investment. So it's kind of, it really ties Steve Ballmer to this whole thing, though, again, no actual conclusion. But we can keep dreaming. We can keep imagining Kawhi Leonard in a Milwaukee Bucks jersey alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm content with doing that, at least until the regular season starts. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest, once again presented by FanArch. As always, I'm Dean Simon, and before you leave, please leave a like, leave a comment down below, tell me what you thought about today's episode, and subscribe. Again, still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so if you could hit that button, I would really, really appreciate it. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.